So good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be joined by Mr. Matt Patsky. Everyone that is joining, I request you all to introduce ourselves, where we are coming from, our countries. Let's use the chat box to introduce ourselves and network for the time being. Welcome, everyone. And as you join, let us make sure that we mute our microphones. I request that we mute our microphones as we join and introduce ourselves in the chat box. Where are we coming from? Which universities are we from? You're all welcome. So I'm just giving us a few minutes to introduce ourselves, all right? I'm seeing some people from Zambia. I'm seeing some people from India, yes, Rwanda. I'm seeing someone from Rwanda. Let's introduce ourselves for just a few minutes. I'm giving us like 1 minute in the chat box. Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm seeing some people from Turkey, Nigeria. There is someone from USA. Welcome. You're all welcome. Someone from Nigeria. Yes, you're all welcome. All right. Just a few seconds, we can introduce ourselves. All right, so as we're being joined by other Millennium Fellows, welcome everyone. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Natkunda Pamela Detrida. I'm from Uganda, from Makerere University. That is the cohort A. I'm the campus director of Makerere University. And for today's webinar, we are joined by the distinguished guest speaker, that is Mr. Matt Patsky. So welcome for today's webinar, everyone. That is it from me. Yes. So I hope that as this is ongoing, we're introducing ourselves in the chat box. Yeah, feel comfortable enough to share your LinkedIn and, connect with everyone around. All right. Okay. All right. I call upon the two speakers that will be, I hope that they are ready. We shall be joined in today's event, in today's webinar. We shall be joined by Mr. Matt Patsky, and then we shall also be joined by two fellows amongst us to give us their ideas and give us a short input. And then we shall have a Q&A session, give some of the questions, and then I'll also give chance to give in some of the questions that they have. So I hope that throughout this webinar, we can listen attentively, and after Mr. Matt Patsky has given in his input, we shall have a chance to ask the questions that we shall have collected from his input, and I believe that this will be a fruitful webinar. All right, so let me go ahead to introduce our keynote speaker for today. His name is Mr. Matt Patsky. Yes, his name is Mr. Matt Patsky. He has such an interesting bio. I think I have to take a minute. So I hope that we listen into this wonderful bio and, kind of be ready to learn something amazing from him. So Mr. Matt Patsky is the CEO and lead portfolio manager of Trillium ESG Global Equity Strategy and the portfolio manager of Trillium Sustainable Opportunities Strategy. Matt has over 3 decades of experience in investment research and investment management. He began his career at Lehman Brothers in 1984 as a technology analyst. And in 1989, while covering emerging growth companies from Lehman, he began to incorporate environmental, social, and governance factors into his research. And in 1994, Matt became the first sell-side analyst in the United States to publish on the topic of socially responsible investing. So as the director of equity research for Adams, Harkins, and Hill, he built the firm's powerful research capabilities in socially and environmentally responsible areas such as renewable energy, resource optimization, and organic and natural products before Trillium. Mr. Matt has worked as Winslow Management Company in Boston, where he has served as Director of Research, Chair of Investment Committee, and Portfolio Manager for the Green Growth and Green Solution Strategies. He currently serves on the board of Tonic and has previously served on the boards of Environmental League of Massachusetts, Shared Interests Pro Mahue, USSIF, and Root Capital. He's also a member of the Social Venture Circle, that is the SVC, and he's a member of the CFA Society Boston, and he's a chartered financial analyst, charter holder. He is also he's on the advisory panels for America's Promise, Generational Climate Change, and SGF and Whole Ventures, and Tara Health Foundation. So we are privileged. Mr. Matt Patsky, I dare not take more of your time. I introduce you to come in and give us your input, please.
Right. Thank you, Pamela, and also I want to thank MCN and the United Nations Academic Impact for launching the Millennium Fellowship, and appreciate the opportunity to. I've presented to this group before, and it's an honor to be asked again to speak. Just to start out with a little bit of background on that the list Pamela gave sounds made me think now I know why I'm tired. But just simply looking back at my own career, I know most of you are in university now and are looking toward your future, and I want to just start off by saying most important thing to ask yourself is what you're passionate about, what brings you joy, and then try to make sure you're developing the skills necessary to pursue those dreams. The biggest mistake that I've seen made again and again by young people is focusing in on how they can make the most money and then spending a life being miserable. So please focus in on what brings you joy and do your best to try to make sure that you're thinking about that and keeping that in mind throughout your life. And you know, for me, in terms of what I decided, and I'm going to just tell you the other important thing for everybody to remember is life always doesn't go as you plan, and you have to be able to roll with it and adapt and accept it and move on. But never lose focus on what that end objective is. And so I'm just going to tell you about my own upbringing and background a little, and then we'll obviously we'll be going into Q&A where I'll dive deeper. But growing up, I grew up in a working class family. My mom and dad actually got married right out of high school, and my dad worked 2 jobs. My mom worked 1 job. That was to make sure that we had a roof over our head and food on the table. And if you were to have asked me when I was in 6th grade what I was going to do with my career, I would have told you I was going to end poverty. Now that's a big goal, and I obviously have not succeeded. But I literally decided I was going to go into addressing economic development, and I was going to go work for, I didn't know where, but somewhere in Washington, D.C., I was going to work on economic development, and I was going to end up working on ending poverty globally. And that's what my goal was. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to get that job that I wanted, but I ended up being offered a job at Lehman Brothers. And one could say that is way off track for a dream about ending poverty. But I never let go of what my end objective was, which was addressing the most pressing social and environmental problems. And ultimately, at Lehman, I had the opportunity, particularly in the late 80s, to start to incorporate environmental social impact. And I got to, you know, in my thesis, which I was, I will say, ridiculed for at the time, was that stronger purpose-driven organizations with strong environmental and social governance focus would outperform over time and would gain share. They would be stronger for talent recruitment, better at talent retention, would have stronger customer loyalty, and that over time they would gain market share. So sort of a big picture idea developed in the late 80s implement it starting in '89, and all the writing I was doing and the research I was doing at Lehman Brothers. It led to me being called into the Associate Directors of Research office. Fred Frankel leaned in and said, "Matt, it's really nice you care about these issues. If you don't stop, it'll destroy your career." Right? That made my decision easy, that I needed to leave Lehman Brothers. And I left Lehman well before they had their troubles. But it is absolutely true that what's critical is that you recognize that what brings you joy and what brings you, what makes you, what you're passionate about is really in the end result what you need to make sure you're focused on. It is not going to be a very fulfilling life if that's all you've done is chased money. And so I would encourage all of you to be thinking about it. And I know many, in this program are looking at leveraging tech and data for impact and social justice work, and lots of opportunity, and also just keep in mind lots of opportunity no matter where you end up. And so one of the other things I find is people will decide that what that means for them is they need a job in an impact investing at a impact investing firm. And I'm like, you have the opportunity to do this work at any company, because there's the opportunity to churn and help change direction of almost any firm. And so if you end up at a job and you're working, you've got a job in government, there's opportunity obviously within government, particularly on policy work. If you end up with the first job you get offered happens to be with the public utility, lots of work in public utilities to improve their technology and try to shift direction for the public utilities. So I just want to encourage you to not think narrowly about how to take your passion and bring it to your job. No matter where, no matter what you're starting in. The other key theme I'd like people to remember is that we need to be aggressive in trying things. And some of the greatest successes are from people really stretching and trying something beyond and that the risk, of course, is failure. And I just want to say some of your best learning will come from your greatest failures. And so I along with my husband in 1993, came up with an idea that people were going to be moving toward healthier foods in the US, and decided we were going to launch a business on this idea. And we launched a business that failed miserably. But I have to say, some of my most valuable life lessons and some of the things that have helped me most in being able to analyze companies and pick companies that are successful were from that failure. That failure taught me more than any master's degree could have. It was an education that was expensive, probably more expensive than an MBA, but taught me much more than I would have learned in an MBA. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Pamela and for opening up for beginning of Q&A. Okay, Pamela, you're mute.
All right, sorry about that.
No
So
problem.
thank you so much for that input. So we have a few questions that we'd like to ask you. And the first one would be, what would you say inspired you to get into the realm of responsible investment and investment research in the arena of social, environmental, and governance?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's interesting because back when I got into it, we didn't have any of that language. So you have to remember, in the 1980s, the only language we had was socially responsible investing. It was the only language we were using. But having initially not succeeded in getting that job that I wanted to work on economic development, I turned my attention to how the capital markets and how the investments in the particularly the public equities market impacted on environmental and social outcomes. And so I was starting to do research as long ago as the mid-'80s on trying to understand better what could be done in terms of different ways in which we could change outcomes on social and environmental impact. And I was lucky enough to have come across some of the early players in the field in the United States that were looking at the different efforts like active ownership as a technique for influencing company behavior. And let me describe active ownership, and then I'll get back to your the question of ESG, which is if you believe factors other than just financial returns are material, and I would tell you they are material, then you need to start studying factors beyond simply the financial reports of a company in order to really understand whether it's sustainable and positioned well for gaining market share. And so as an example of my early work in the 1980s, I spent a lot of time dealing with human resources. Now terminology is here in the US is moving toward the term people and culture, but really trying to understand how they thought about development of and retention of human capital. And so my first meeting request for every company I went to visit was to ask for an hour and a half with their HR group, and I would start by asking those very questions. What do you think about in terms of how you're recruiting people? What is your starting salaries? What are your benefits packages? And in doing so, I was getting great insight into the quality of that management team. And and one of the big drivers, quite frankly, you can have a great idea. If you don't have a quality management team, you're not going to actually be able to succeed. And so I was really discovering something that is very true, which is oftentimes the profile of the company that we now refer to as the environmental, social, and governance profile is very helpful in indicating whether or not the management team is stronger and better quality than other management teams. And that's very helpful for being able to identify winners in an industry. And so that's kind of how I got to it, was a passion about the environmental social outcomes. What I learned is it was an incredibly valuable tool for being a much better investor.
All right, thank you so much. I noticed that anytime that your name comes up anywhere, research is always there around the corner in your descriptions. So our second question was, noting that investment within itself has power, how do we as young leaders navigate this power aspect of investment, given the fact that investment actually has real policy change and implication?
So first off, recognizing that it has power is really important. And so in one of the asks I have of all of you is challenge what the conventional wisdom is. Don't be afraid to because you will run into, and it's going to happen, you'll run into plenty of people who say it's a trade-off. If you're going to do something right by the environment, you're going to lose on the bottom line, and therefore you're going to earn less money. And there may be short-term trade-offs. I'm not going to argue that, but challenge that convention that there is always a sacrifice when you do the right thing, because it's not true. It is there may be some short-term trade-offs that exist, and I don't, like I said, we certainly can give you examples of that, but ultimately, you will end up in situations where you're faced with that. Am I making a decision for the long term or for the short term? And think long term, and argue about the long term, because I was going to say there may be a sacrifice in the short term, right? When you do the right thing. I would argue there is very rarely a sacrifice when you do the right thing in the long run. You talk about reputation, you talk about attracting talent, and you talk about the strength of customer loyalty, and what customers are looking for, what your employee, what people who are going to work for you are looking for, is more long-term thinking. And so that's a conventional thought process around maximizing profits requires that I ignore all of the impacts I'm having on the world around me and the people. And we've got to break that mindset. We've got to be looking long term. We've got to be thinking long term. And so when so many of you will end up in successful careers and positions where you're making decisions, and I just ask that you try to step back and think long term. The investment money has incredible power and impact. It has impact in investments. It has impact in your purchasing power. You every time you're making a decision about how money is used, it's having impact in the world. Being thoughtful about that impact is important. And for us, the lesson we have is that even though we may not be the largest investor in Apple, that we have an investment in Apple allows us to create a coalition of other investors to go and press for changes of behavior in the supply chain for Apple. And that has impact. And we're able to have impact in coalition. And there's always the ability, over time, an awful lot of the investment dollars have gone passive and are invested just in benchmark. If you're just invested passively, you're not using the influence of that or the impact you could have with that money. And there's tremendous opportunity, particularly in coalition, to press for changes in behavior, both with individual companies and with governments. So.
Okay. Then Meshi in the chat seems to agree with you, saying that there is always a sacrifice when you do the right thing. So you've talked about that need for pressing for impact and change, which brings us to our next question. The sector of investment has not always been associated with bringing about social change and emancipation of communities. So I'd like to know, as someone who has been trying to bring about this change and impact through this sector, what advice would you give to navigate through this for the Millennium Fellows?
There are plenty of investment companies that are not thinking about this, and that is what creates the opportunity for the players like us to be able to deliver outperformance over time. So if everyone thought like we did, I do think it would be a better world, but there wouldn't be necessarily an opportunity to deliver the outperformance that we're delivering if everyone were looking at the same factors. So I would just say the social and environmental impact in the investment world is, while increasingly understood to be material, particularly in Europe, it is still not widely appreciated globally, and that creates that opportunity. you know, we can certainly point to a lot of negative impacts through the the sector of investments, you know, through history. But I would just say, you know, again, keep focused on what the long-term objectives are and what your hopes are, and don't be distracted by the lure of short-term making lots of money. I mean, I'm you know, I was actually just on the phone with a online market letter publisher who was telling me that the hottest topic right now was precious metals, and that he had lots of interest in precious metals. And I'm like, you know, that's sort of the kind of a thing someone jumps on when they're thinking short term. They're trying to figure out how they can make money in the short term. But precious metals provide no yield, and so certainly precious metals have an incredibly important part of our economy, and I don't want to take anything away from that, because it's important in industrial production and in the transition to a cleaner fuels. We need precious metals for that. But it's when you have people looking to, for example, just simply buy gold bars and bury it in their backyard, that I just have to question whether or not they're really thoughtful about the impact of their money. And I would say keep focused on making sure that if you're looking at the investment field, looking at how your investments are impacting the world, making sure that you're trying to focus in on having positive social and environmental change.
Okay, thank you so much. You've talked about the impact not being appreciated in some cases. And here it leads us to our next question. What is the most surprisingly rewarding experience in your journey of working with responsible investment in social and environmental issues?
We've had many successes along the way. One of the you know, great areas of success we've had is with lots of focus on the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion in the workforce, in the boardroom. And I think one of my sort of the greatest successes we've had, which is also seeing a backlash in the United States, is that we have pressed that it is best practice, that it is best that companies who have been thoughtful about making sure that there is broad that their recruiting process and their practices internally allow for both the recruitment of diversity and also the programs of inclusiveness, so that people are welcome in there and people stay in the organization, so there's strong retention. I think that's probably been one of the one of my greatest senses of success for us as a firm, is broadly doing that. And so it cuts across lots of forms of diversity, equity, inclusion. But I think when you get the backlash coming from as we're seeing now from Washington, from one of the political parties, that you had success because it's been impacting people and they're actually reacting to it. So and that's true on DEI, but it's also true on our efforts on addressing climate change. And so for those who are not aware, specifically, we were there's a line of attack coming from Washington that's basically saying Trillium, along with 6 other major players, has successfully pressed on the issue of carbon output that we've caused a increased cost of capital for firms with high carbon output. And I look at that and say, well, that's a badge of honor, and that's incredible success. Now, the fact that it's coming in a letter from the current Congress in the United States telling us that they're looking to try to figure out how to criminally charge us for pushing the price of carbon up is more, like I said, it's more of a badge of honor than it is anything else. But I think we're seeing signs that we have moved the needle in a whole range of issue areas, and that it's been incredibly rewarding as I pass my 14 years here at the helm of Trillium.
All right, thank you so much for your feedback and sharing with us, and I'm sure that it has been a rewarding experience. So we are going to move on to our next sector on our agenda, which is the open Q&A from the Millennium Fellows. So I'm sure that these people who have been listening to you have so many burning questions, and they would like to maybe ask you some of the things that have come up as they have listened to your input and what you've shared with us. So I request that we raise our hands so that we can maybe use order to we can pick you. Raise your hand if you have a question, and then we can request you to unmute and give us your question. So as we are raising our hands, I'm sure that we have questions we have prepared for our guest speaker. Remember to introduce yourself, give us your name, which country you're from, because this is a very diverse space, and then the university that you're coming from. Let us hear from you. So you introduce yourself and then ask your question. All right, I'm seeing Joram John. He has raised his hand. So I request you to unmute yourself. Joram John, unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question in just a very few seconds,
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Joram John from Abubakar Fablewa University, Nigeria. And we've heard you said a lot about how you started, and you talked about us going for passion, going for what we love doing, because at the end of the day, that's what makes sense. Now, in our journey of actualizing our dreams, now how can we some of us that are in the third world countries, like here in Africa, the technological improvements that has been happening globally for years now, and then we're just starting to feel along. Finding mentors around us is quite difficult. So how, I don't know, can you advise how we could go about getting people that could help us actualize our dreams? Like, I don't know if you understand my question. Did you get me right?
Okay. I mean, I think you're asking about finding a mentor, and maybe that mentor is someone outside of Africa. Is that to try to help you? Is that what you're saying, or find a mentor locally?
Yeah. Finding a mentor, because most of us, like my project is based on is targeted towards zero hunger and integrating technology, that building on agri-technology. But then we don't have firms that are really into that around us here. So how can I sail along with mentors that are gone far into this sector?
Right. I'm not sure I am in a position to sort of connect you to a mentor, but I would MCN, I think, was designed to try to help connect people, but I'm not sure I'd be sort of pointing you back to probably the program to say, is there a effort to try to connect the the participants to mentors in their areas of expertise? And I'm afraid it's not, technology isn't my particular area of expertise, but there are certainly, I think, a number of programs out there, but unfortunately, I don't have an exact solution for you today.
Okay, I'm seeing someone else. Habib Ahmed Salim. Please kindly unmute and introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question.
Hello, I am Habib Ahmed Salim from Ghana on SDD, University of Business and Integrated Development Studies, West Africa, Ghana. Please, as a project manager, if you are not being able to meet your project goals and objectives, what should you do aftermath?
You're saying if you had a project assigned and you weren't able to meet the objectives, what
Yes,
would be
please.
what would be the next step for you?
Yes, please.
With
Yes.
the people who are supporting the project?
Yeah.
I think it happens all the time that big projects are not on schedule or delayed, and so what any manager or somebody who's hired somebody to do a project is looking for is just transparency and a report back of the progress that's been made, where it is, and then a new estimate of when it could be accomplished or done. And if there is something that's gone so far off that you now don't believe it can be completed, that's incredibly valuable, right? Information of, what you hired me, this project cannot be completed for the following reasons, is valuable information also. So basically it's transparency, right? You need to be able to provide transparency because it is, of course, not unusual at all for projects to be delayed. And there certainly are, I can point to plenty of examples of projects where you go down the path of implementation to realize it's just not a viable path that we were taking, and we have to reassess, right? Mistakes are made all the time, and if you've discovered that this was not if that's what you've discovered, is this is not a good direction, or you've discovered simply that it's going to take more time and resources, that's all incredibly valuable information.
All right. Thank you very much for your response.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful answer, and I'm sure that he asked on behalf of all of us because we face those challenges every day. So there's a question from Wensi Amor Valsteros. I apologize if I mispronounce your name.
So much for noticing me. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Sir Matt. I am Wensi Amor from the Philippines, and I'm an economics major in the engineering colleges, and I would like to ask, what ethical implications have you encountered in managing assets in portfolio, and how do you ensure the integration of ethical practices in asset and portfolio management?
Okay. So great question, and it is absolutely true that we have to step back and remember that companies are made up of people, and companies, like people, are not perfect. So if I were looking for trying to invest in only perfect companies where there were no flaws and I didn't find any ethical challenges, I would end up with no investments. And so what we try to do is look for companies that are better than, and that are trying to improve, and recognize that very fact that there's always room for improvement. There's room for Trillium to improve, and there's room for every company that we invest in to improve. What we do is document where they are on that sort of path to implementing best practices, and look for improvements in environmental and social impact. And we actually engage our companies multiple times per year on multiple issues. And last year, we typically have around 75 names in a typical portfolio. And last year we engaged our companies over 600 times. And most of those were successful in that the company came back and said, you're right, this is something we should be improving and we're working on it. And here's what we're planning. So I hope that answers your question, but the you know, the really what you're looking for is an acknowledgement that there needs to be constant striving to improve on the ethical outcomes of business practices.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope that your question has been answered. More, I see you had typed in the chat. Then the next person, she had typed the same question. The next person to speak is Inusa Idrisu. Kindly unmute and tell us where you're from, and then you can ask your question.
All right, thank you. I am Suraj Inusa Idrisu, and I'm a student of University of Ghana, that is in Ghana. Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in this conversation. I'm someone who is particularly interested in equity and asset management and all that, so I really enjoyed your conversation. Yeah, but I would like to know what are some of the qualities that you think that you would recommend for young people like us who would want to trade on the equity market or the capital market? What are some of the qualities that you think that as young people we need to harvest or we need to cultivate so that we can do very well in this field? Thank you.
Yep. So strongest skill is not going to surprise you is strong math skills, and what we love to see is a real strong background in accounting, and that tends to be a great base. Now, we would encourage you to start the CFA program as soon as you can, including while you're still in college, because it's also given us a signal that you've made a decision, you really care about this field and want to be in this field long term. The CFA is a very intense program. If you've looked it up, it's a full 3-year program. But what you'll find if you started early is that your academic background has prepared you probably for level 1 without too much additional studying, and so it's a great time to do it. And the other thing I will say is that I've had a lot of I've hired a lot of analysts and a lot of portfolio managers over time. One of the strongest one of the strongest background combinations that I've seen is somebody who's come out of an accounting background, somebody who's actually gone through the CPA program and then come out and gone on and done the CFA program. And that the reason is that's given you all of the background on how people put together financial statements, and then also the proper tools for tearing that back apart and re-looking at it through the CFA program is all about trying to how to analyze those financial reports. So having the combined background of strong accounting and then the CFA, I think, is probably the background, the combination background that you will want for a successful career in financial services.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'd have the next person speaking, our very own Mr. James Odiambo. Kindly let us know, because I see your arm is up.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Matt.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to answer a question, which was someone just said, what is the CFA? And it's the Chartered Financial Analyst Program, and it's out of Charlottesville, Virginia. But I'm going to just put Chartered, so Chartered Financial Analyst is what CFA stands for. So.
Perfect, thank you. I was just gonna ask a quick question as we were waiting for a few more hands from the fellows. But Matt, I want to ask you two related questions. One is, so when you think about social impact investing, which as you said is, you know, a new terminology, when you think about it vis-a-vis philanthropy, which has been around for centuries, do you see any? I know there's a lot of, you know, academic and industry specific debate about and you know which one should serve us better. Do you see one as being detrimental to the other? So do you think that the dollars that are going into social impact investing, some of them should be related to philanthropy work that is not designed to create any sort of profit? Or do you see these two regimes sort of working together, surviving together? And my second question is related to your, you know, your personal work background. So you left Lehman Brothers. I guess this was about a decade before the financial crisis. In my commercial law class, and I guess in every commercial law class, we learn about Lehman Brothers these days. You left because you felt that your career needed to take a different direction. And then a couple of years later, the bank fell and disintegrated. Did you ever sit down and think about this as fate, or as this, you know, seeing the place that you went in first to build your career and you decided off of you know, instinct to just leave? Has it influenced the way you choose the places you choose to work for, the people you choose to work with, or the, you know, your ability to trust your instinct in terms of, you know, I'm currently working in one of the best financial institutions in the world, but I'm going to leave because my heart tells me to do so?
Great question. So let me let's start with the difference between philanthropy and impact investing, and let me try to take you through it. Actually, Lehman Brothers, I left 16 years before the financial collapse, and you know, I joke it collapsed because I left, but that has nothing to do with it. And I obviously, it is that there was a broad problem in the financial services industry of adopting very short-term thinking that led to the financial crisis. And by the way, the problem isn't gone, because it really wasn't fixed. So there's still plenty of problems in the financial system, and plenty of problems in the way in which there's an awful lot of short-termism. Anyway, but I'm not gonna. We don't need to dwell on that right now. But the difference between philanthropy and impact investing, there is it's a spectrum of capital. Philanthropy is expecting a negative 100% return, right? They're giving the money away and hoping to have positive impact in donating that money, and there is an absolute important role for philanthropy to play in the structure of a lot of social enterprises, and there are social enterprises that need to be, quite frankly, set up as nonprofits because they're just not financially viable to build a business around. So, but in impact investing implies I'm expecting a return. But there's also a spectrum of impact investing, because there are plenty of impact investors that are using philanthropic dollars. And this is a question I think you're trying to get at, which is sometimes money that was meant to be given away is now being put in as an investment. And their expectations may be that they expect below market returns, or they may expect slight negative returns, or they may be quite comfortable, quite frankly, with getting no return. So I was talking to the head of impact investing at one of the foundations in the U.S., and I asked the question from the stage. I was the moderator. I asked the question from the stage of, could you give me the best success story you've had in your impact investing portfolio? And the company that she picked to talk about was called GADCO, and it was it was bringing back rice production to Ghana. And then I said, well, what were the financial returns? And she said, oh, we lost everything. It went to zero for us. We were the first money in, but it's now a successful enterprise and it's actually producing rice in Ghana. And so we show that as one of our most successful impact investments because we got it off the ground and we provided the seed capital that got it to the stage where it was investable for traditional investors. So just sort of the way in which sort of the spectrum works. So yes, I've seen examples of where I think it should be philanthropic money and they've gone for market rate return investments, and I think that's inappropriate, but I'm not in charge of the entire world of investing. And so we see people doing different things where you're like, there are certain questions about how money's shifted because of the adoption of impact investing and the language around it. But it is largely what we're trying to educate people on is there's a spectrum within the world of impact investing, and there is the opportunity in many areas to invest in something that's going to have positive social and environmental impact and market rate returns. So we shouldn't look at it narrowly as being needing to sacrifice returns in order to do good in the world, because that's not true. And I can show you many examples of the design of portfolios that are based on because the financial needs they needed market rate returns for this specific endowment. This is how we handled it in order to build their portfolio, where in other portfolios we may have done some returns that were below market in order to have more catalytic impact. So.
Thank you so much. So we are running out of time, but we are going to answer just one more question. I see Kanisha has been raising, I don't know, her or his hand for a while now. So be very brief and let us know your question.
Oh, Kanisha, you are still muted. Kanisha, you're still muted. There you go. You're off. Yep.
Thank you. Greetings, sir, and everybody present in the webinar today. I'm Kanisha, and the campus director from my cohort, and also a sophomore pursuing my bachelor's in commerce honors from Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi, India. To be very specific, I actually have just one question that goes like, what specific criteria and metrics do you use, sir, to assess the sustainability and the impact of potential investments that you make in your portfolio? And I would also love to know that as one of the leaders in sustainable investing, what advice would you give to individual investors and other asset managers who want to make a meaningful impact through their investments?
Okay, thank you. So starting out with characteristics we look at, we are doing there's plenty of data sources now available, right? MSCI, Sustainalytics, ISS, just to name three of the bigger ones, but there's lots of tools, lots of data. Much of the data, unfortunately, is still not great, and that's just a reality of there's no standardization of what's required to be reported, and a lot of the data is obviously, most of the data I should say, is just being self-reported. There's no government requirement for reporting, and there's no standard for what needs to be reported. You're getting an awful lot of data that's self-reported that, quite frankly, is not very good quality. So what we're doing is we're trying to take the data that we do have access to, and we're buying the raw data, and we're trying to spend time really doing a deep dive on the companies before we invest. We by the way, we don't own 500 names in a portfolio. We typically own 75. We have a team of 22 people. We're literally making the phone calls, talking to the company, doing analysis on what's available in terms of all the information from the public markets. One of our best sources of data, by the way, is from a series of NGOs around the world working on specific issue areas. You want to know about labor standards in the field in India? There are NGOs that are there that are actually monitoring labor standards in India, and you can talk to the NGO and get a lot of feedback about what they're seeing on the ground. And so you get an awful lot of input that's coming that you're pulling together, and it's not simple, it's complex. And then you're calling the company and saying, we understand there's a problem with this particular facility. We want to know what you're doing to address it, and having a conversation. It is many times where you're calling a company and they're saying, we didn't know that. Like, you're giving them information and they're saying, we're going to look into that. And then they get back to you to talk about what they're trying to do to address it. So it's a back and forth. We end up now, whereas 42 years ago when we started, we were generally, I think, viewed by the companies as a nuisance. We're generally now viewed as a collaborative partner with the companies we invest in. And they generally want to hear what we're saying, because we're usually bringing them some very good insight and information about their operations that they may be unaware of. And some thoughts about maybe things they should be doing to improve, right, different things. So we're doing that, and then we're doing our own assessment of ranking them within industry. And once we've ranked them in industry, we decide we're going to try to invest in the better operators. And we also do a lot of analysis. I mean, part of our scoring is based on our conversation with management on whether we think they're intentionally trying to move to improve, right? So we're forward looking on our ESG scores, where most of the ESG data is just backward looking, and that gives us some insight. And so we can end up with a name on our buy list that we rank as being one of the better. And an example of this is Costco. We had ranked them better and ranked them among the top quartile of retailers in the US, where MSCI, this is 4 years ago, had ranked them in the bottom quartile. And we would have to explain to people who are institutional investors with us why that is, but we were able to go through and explain it and say, and now, of course, it's now ranked much higher at MSCI, because all the things we were talking to the company about and learning about what they were doing, now backward looking, it's reflected in their score at MSCI, right? So that's kind of our approach. Advice for broad investment companies that are looking at getting into it, I would just say, all of the evidence is this information is material. It might not be that the actual data, the mistake people make is they go ahead and they buy a data set and they say, I'm just going to lay this on top. And I'm like, it's a mistake. The data is filled with errors. And so, I mean, MSCI has got a team of people doing this in India and the Philippines. And we talk to them all the time, because we pick up the phone and say, here's another error we found. But it's impossible. You go to work for MSCI, Kanisha, they're going to give you like 350, 400 companies and tell you you're responsible for keeping the scores on all of them. You don't have time to talk to the companies. So you're just simply doing what you can, right, to collect what's available and score it. And it's the fault of the system right now, that the system isn't very well done. And of course, policy needs to be improved across the globe for developing standards of what's being required to be reported, and what format, and what's exactly what we're trying to measure. As we get better reporting, that raw data will be better. Then you could depend on a data set, but right now you can't. And so you've got to end up really, like, if you're looking for to get to a better result, you really want to go with a player that's been doing it a while. Yeah. Thank you. There are a lot of questions, by the way, in the chat, and I just want to ask if somebody is going to be able to capture the chat and send it back to me so that I can answer questions for people afterwards, because it looks like an awful lot of questions are in the chat.
Yeah, I managed to capture around 2 from the chat.
All right, good.
Was asking how to incorporate social impact in the health career without necessarily moving out of the system of, like, maybe the health system. And then
Okay.
also, and the second question was about how to achieve success in when you're pursuing a professional degree, like a profession. It wasn't very specific. That's what they were asking about.
Repeat that last part.
How to achieve success when they are pursuing a professional degree.
Okay. Meaning while you're in school, how to achieve success? I'm not sure I understand that last question, but let's talk about healthcare, and then we'll try to address if we can get a little more detail on what they mean by achieving success while pursuing a professional degree. So in healthcare, I mean, I suppose it depends on what part. I mean, if you're talking about healthcare in most of the world, it is a service generally paid for by, or generally, I should say, not particularly lucrative and oftentimes covered by government or nonprofits. And so I'm not really sure whether you're saying, incorporating environmental social governance, or whether you're just looking at, because it is, I'll just say it's a tough business and I only know the work I've done in Africa and Latin America on healthcare. We've had through nonprofits. This has all been philanthropic. We've had difficulty in getting operations to being self-sustaining, because there is, you end up in the private side, constantly running up, competing against government programs that are providing services, that are generally offered free, and then you end up needing to set everything up as nonprofits in order to make sure you're continually getting philanthropic capital in order to sustain the operations. But I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure I'm following the question either there, so I may be way off. But I just say, that particularly has been a field that I found difficult for us in looking at finding any investment opportunities because of that. And so most of our work has been working with our clients who have philanthropic, I should say, impact capital, where they're willing to take below market returns, and we've done debt capital. So, and Pamela, I'm not sure if you can articulate that other question for me, but I'm, of success while pursuing a professional degree.
I didn't quite get it too. It wasn't well articulated, I must say.
Okay, well,
maybe the one that I've captured, it was talking about the relationship between, how do you see the relationship between philanthropy and social impact investing evolving in the coming years?
Oh, so the evolution. I do think from the foundation endowment side, we'll see more recognition of the spectrum and collaboration between the grant side of the house and the investment side of the house, trying to look at how they can support each other. And so there is, and there's certainly evidence of that in some of the, some foundations, like I see evidence of that at Ford Foundation, just as an example. But and then there's a number of smaller ones that I've seen it at. here in the US, where there's been much more of a collaboration between that grant capital and social impact and the basically the endowment side of the house, to try to make sure that there's an effort to accomplish the objectives and mission of the foundation. A small one in Portland, Oregon, Lemelson Foundation, was a great example where we actually saw them collapse the endowment management and the grant making basically under the same group, so that it really was seamless, and it all kind of fit together, which I think is a brilliant approach.
Thank you so much. So any other questions, we shall be mailing them to you. I know that these posts still have so many questions for you, so we shall forward them. We are coming to an end of our webinar, so every good thing has to come to an end. And even though it has been so fulfilling, we believe that we have learned something, and would like to know if the Millennium Fellows can get to you, if they can contact you in any way, how can they access you? Would like to request you to share with us your social media handles for any follow-up questions, maybe the chat. So we request that maybe you share with us your social media handles in the chat, in the webinar chat room.
I would love to, and I'm like sitting here now thinking, let me see if I can pull up at least my LinkedIn and get it into the because I'm
all right, so as he types for us his social media handles, for the Millennium Fellows, something for us next week also has the Millennium Fellowship has also prepared for us some webinars for next week. Let's keep an eye on our emails. We shall have 2 webinars next week. That is from Mr. Michael Nietegeka, and on Friday from Nikhil Tadneja. Yeah. So we shall be expecting that for next week. I think with us.
All right, I've got it, and I'm going to post it. And apologies, I'm taking so long. I'm not as strong as all of you in technology.
You've been creating a lot of investment, social impact, so we understand.
So, someone else already got it. Thank you, James. You were quicker than I.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Mr. Matt Patsky. We have been honored to have you. It has been a pleasure. I don't know if you can just give us a very final word, and then we can exit the webinar.
No, my final word is basically my first word, which is, follow your passion, focus on what brings you joy, and you need to be able to sort of roll with the fact that everything isn't linear. You don't end up with everything going right all the time. So, which I know you all know, but it's just it's like the keep pushing forward. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you too so much for your time. We have been pleased and we have been enlightened by your input. Yeah, that is it for today. Have a lovely evening, everyone.